have 3:30. I can't quite see the clock over there, but I think we're good, 3:30. So I'll calling to order the meeting of the Iowa City Climate Action Commission on Monday, February 7th, 2022. And welcome. And before we get to roll call, I just wanted to recognize John Fraser and Stratus Giannakouros for their leadership over the past year. John served as our chair and Stratus served as vice chair. So a thank you to them. I think we're allowed to applaud. And also appreciation to all the commissioners who are working together, plus everybody new who's joined us. I'll make sure y'all can hear me. I know I don't have the loudest voice in the room, but I just want to thank everyone because I know serving as commissioner takes both time and energy. And at our next meeting, we're going to have a little time, right, Rachel, to be able to, for folks to get to know each other a little bit. We'll have some time for that. And you can remember, look at the sustainability newsletter for past profiles, and more will be coming of commissioners. I think, Michael, you were just in the latest one. So please check those so we can keep kind of learning about each other as well as our purpose here on the commission. So with that, roll call, and please correct me. I want to get everybody's last name correct. And I get to start, Michael, it's Einan Lynch, correct? Okay, so Michael, and just say present, obviously, if you're here. Michael Einan Lynch.
Present.
John Fraser.
Present.
Stratus Giannakouros. Ben Grimm.
Present.
Claire DeGuerra. Here. Megan Hill. And we don't have anyone on Zoom or?
No, there's no one on Zoom at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sarah. Casey Hutchinson, Matt Krieger,
Here.
Jesse Leckbend, Becky Soglin present, and Gabe Sturdivant.
Present.
Thanks, everyone. And then would staff, we don't really have anyone from the public present, but I don't do staff. Would staff like to mention their names or?
Sarah Gardner present.
Thanks. So next is approval of the January 10th, 2022 minutes. They were in the packet. Were any corrections needed? And if not, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Who was the second? I had my head down.
Clarity.
Thanks, Clarity.
So the minutes of January 10th, 2022 are approved. So next, we would normally have public comments of items not on the agenda. There's no one present from the public, so I believe we can just move on. And item 5 now are informational updates. First is administrative reminders from me, and I assure you after this, I will pretty much be quiet. But this is partly because this is our meeting early in the year. So you all have received the bylaws in the past, and we wanted to, since it's a new year, new board members, and it's always good to have some reminders. Just going to go over a few of the highlights from the bylaws, so our favorites from the bylaws. Duties are to advise the city council on climate issues, to research, analyze, and promote climate actions with particular attention to equity, educate and engage with the public on climate action and the city's climate and sustainability goals, assist city staff, city council, and members of the community with implementing approved initiatives that support the city's climate and sustainability goals, including the climate action and adaptation plan and any related or updated plan hereafter. Recommend to the city council updates to the climate action and adaptation plan, and a sort of by extension, probably that 100-day action plan. The chair and vice chair obviously elected in January within our membership, and I will preside over the meetings, and our vice chair, Gabe, will take over in the event of my absence. Anyone who misses 3 meetings in a row without prior approval of the excuse action, it forces us, the commission, to recommend to the city council that that member be discharged and someone else be appointed. So, and the way to not get to that point usually is you'll make sure you contact Sarah and Rachel about any upcoming planned absences, just an email to them so they can record that. For our monthly meeting, 6 or more members must be physically present to constitute a quorum. And working groups or subcommittees are not a full meeting of the commission unless 6 commissioners are present. And so even if there isn't a quorum at one of the working group meetings or some other event with a group of commissioners, we're always kind of mindful that we want to deliberate and discuss everything as a full group here in terms of our final decision making. And the working groups can include the members of the public. So motions of our commission are decided by the majority of votes cast at any meeting. So I guess if we have 9 commissioners present, that would be 5 votes. And if it's 8, and does it have to be? It still has to be 5 then, if it's 8. So, okay. And then if we, the commission, want to make some kind of specific recommendation to the city council, we need to deliver that suggestion in the form, in a form other than just the minutes. So like a memo or some kind of, I guess, report. And so I think what we've done, this isn't, if it's okay to go a little bit beyond the bylaws, it's not in the bylaws, but I think by extension, if a working group wants to make a recommendation to the council, what we did in the past for like the building working group was we shared the draft with staff for input, and then we brought it to the commissioners and everyone got to discuss it and vote on it. So the memo ultimately came from the commission, even though one working group was focused on that topic. And just, this is actually the very first item in the bylaw, but just our purpose is to enhance and enable further community efforts to achieve the city's ambitious climate goals. And I think we can all kind of be proud and energized by that word, ambitious. So it's been happening for a couple of years, and where things are getting accomplished. And with that, I'll turn it over to, or I guess is this okay if there's questions, to take any questions or need any clarifications? Does anyone have? So I thought the bylaws are everyone's favorite. So.
I was going to say thank you. I think that's really
Oh, good to know. So great. Yeah, no, always, if I think anything procedurally is confusing, we can always try to clear it. Usually if one person has the question, probably everybody does. So, but thanks. All right. Action items from last meeting. This is for staff.
So the one action item from the last meeting was continued discussion of the marketing plan and solar study as appropriate by the working group members. And you'll see in the minutes included in the agenda packet from those working groups that how those discussions proceeded.
And the action work plan update is also a staff item.
She's here. Rachel Kilberg, Assistant City Manager. So these, so the update to the action work plan, or just the updates on the action work plan, was included in last month's packet. Because of the packed agenda that we had at that time, we delayed discussion until this month. So there hasn't been any updates to what was included in last month's packet, and you will again hear this next month with updates from the past 2 months. So some of these items may have a few more kind of updates that aren't included here, but I'll just kind of go through here. Won't, per usual, won't touch on everything. And just a reminder for new members and old, that typically staff uses this time to kind of call out major updates or accomplishments related to the 100-day climate action report. If there's something that we specifically want you to discuss or to take up on a future agenda, we'll call that out. And of course, it's up to the commissioners to also bring up items, whether it's included in the kind of the summarized updates or not, if there are items that you want to discuss or are looking for an update on. So that being said, I'll just kind of go through here. Like I said, won't touch on everything. First, the energy efficient city rehab projects. I'll talk about this kind of in conjunction with the fourth one down under that building summary, which is the residential electrification and energy efficiency rehab grant program. These are very similar kind of initiatives, but both resulted from a collaboration between the Climate Action Office and our Neighborhood and Development Services Division, where we've identified kind of priority improvements when the city is rehabbing buildings, residential properties specifically for rental or to be included in the homeowner rehab programs. So and then in addition to that, when there are residents who are participating in our rehab grant programs, climate action funds again may be provided as a grant so that they can either kind of increase the improvements that are being made, which wouldn't have been possible with just the federal funds that Neighborhood Development Services had access to, or to do additional improvements that wouldn't have been made. So the kind of the high priority items that the climate action staff identified are window replacements, insulation, and electrical panel upgrades, and wraps around the houses. The Neighborhood Energy Blitz expansion, Sarah has been working kind of on a phase 2 to go back to the South District neighborhood and do kind of a more neighborhood driven phase 2 program. And then also to launch a phase 1, which is kind of delivery of those kits throughout the neighborhood in the Lucas Farms neighborhood. The Commercial and Industrial Energy Efficiency Incentive Program. So as you recall, that kind of matching grant TIF program was started in the Hines, Sycamore, Scott 6 urban renewal areas. Recently, we launched a similar program in the downtown Riverfront Crossings and Northside Marketplace area. We haven't got a ton of interest yet, so we've kind of expanded that deadline and are upping our kind of promotion and outreach related to that program. And then just wanted to call attention to a major upgrade of HID to LED lighting that's taking place in all the parking deck ramps. So 10 have been completed on the Court Street, 31 are planned to take place this spring at the Dubuque, Capitol, and Chauncey Swan ramps. And then also noted here that Public Works staff are proceeding with a directly purchase solar installation for that new Public Works facility down on the south end.
Rachel, did you want to take any comments during your update or kind of at the end?
If you want to kind of go
I
as
just had a question about the matching grant program, the commercial industrial
Mhm.
program. Do you see that as like an annual thing, like an ongoing offering?
I think at this time it's planned for just kind of a one time. So really the genesis of it in the Scott Hines area, as you know, is because there's a sunsetting TIF district with some remaining increment that needed to be used up. The downtown one is not based on TIF. So we see it kind of being a one-time kind of thing, which could be revisited every so year, but not annually.
Okay.
Couple of upcoming things. Sarah and Danny continue to work on holding a lunch and learn with building and construction professionals, getting that planned. And we are working on reviewing that final solar study that JSA delivered to us to look at what staff would recommend for next steps.
And so Rachel and Sarah, the education event with the building and construction professionals, is that a focus on that energy, or could you remind me what the focus of that is?
Yeah, so this grows out of the discussions we've been having about how to forward air source heat pumps in the community. And as staff have explored that over the last year, one of the big pinch points we've identified, which to be honest, will probably continue to be a pitch point, at least for a little bit, is getting contractors on board. Many of the contractors we've spoken to in the area have said that these heat pumps don't work above the Missouri state line, which was news to Danny and I, since we both have one. So the idea is we identified a speaker actually at the Iowa Energy Summit who did a great job of talking about new developments in the technology, including cold climate heat pumps. Our thought was to bring in the speaker to talk to area contractors more about the technology so they could be more familiar with it. And also to bring their attention to some resources available through the Minnesota Heat Pump Coalition that include online modules you can take to learn how to sell the equipment, thinking that if they understand the selling proposition, that may be a better incentive for them as well. So that's the rough and dirty.
No, that's really helpful, and maybe something to eventually, maybe something for the public could be, and then maybe members of the commission who would want to attend something like that to get more informed, or building inspectors or.
Yeah, certainly when we have the date set up for it, we're going to be hosting it virtually now. Our idea originally was to try to host it as an in-person lunch and learn, thinking if we had sandwiches, it would be easier to get people in the door, but the pandemic being what it is, it's going to be virtual. And that has the advantage of allowing us to record it and also the advantage of allowing us to invite more people. So we can send out that invite link to all of you as well. And anybody who'd like to listen in is certainly welcome to do so. The one hiccup I should mention that we've hit most recently is that the speaker we had originally identified to give this talk has left his former place of employment and the industry entirely. So he provided the name of someone else who could be able to fill in his spot. And we've been in discussion with that person trying to set up a date.
Okay, well, thanks for pursuing it. And I guess some of us, because by virtue of what our work is, we could forward that invite as well, help get the word out. So thanks.
Okay, moving along. Hopefully you all have seen the new electric buses out on the streets. They look fantastic. Maybe you had a chance to hop on one and ride as well. So those are kind of rolling. Sarah took the opportunity on the first day that they were running to just ride the first hour and talk to people about how it fits into our climate action work, which went over really well. You may have seen in the sustainability newsletter that first rider who had a chance to be spotlighted in there. So that's very exciting. And we're going to look at doing that as the buses go on to new routes too, because it's been a really positive touch point. Moving on to the waste side of things, one thing I'll touch on here, a couple months ago, we mentioned that we were approached by Table to Table about partnering on kind of maybe piloting like a small scale commercial food waste processing system, and then seeing if there would be capacity for drop off, but initially focusing just on the food waste that's being generated on site. And recently, our resource management staff helped Table to Table and community conduct a food waste audit. And based on the results, they found that there was a potential to save about 15 tons of food waste each year if we were to proceed with this. So we're going to continue kind of working on that collaboration and keep you updated as we go. Under adaptation, Sarah is continuing to kind of drive forward the teen resilience core concept. We have executed an agreement with ASTIG Planning, who will be helping out with that as well. If you have any questions, Sarah can take those today. Otherwise, I imagine next month we'll be able to have a more comprehensive update on that item. Just a nice recognition that the city recently learned that we hold the record for the most environmentally responsible management athletic fields, certified athletic fields. There's only 45 facilities worldwide that have this, and we have the most. So that is very exciting and a testament to our parks' hard work.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
With the teen resilience core, and I know like the resilience hub planning, that whole, I guess this is like a broader question. In the action plan, there's a whole column about areas for the commission to engage. I'm specifically interested in that one about resilience hubs. And I'm just wondering, what is the proper way to like engage in those? You sort of like have opportunities for the commission. And I'm wondering like, how do I like announce myself as like, I'm interested in
Discussion
engaging
about,
with it?
yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, we'll have Sarah mark that down, and kind of as those discussions move along, we can get you looped in there. Resilience hubs are one item that is going to be a major focus from the staff's perspective in the coming years. We have awarded a grant right now for A&W Sustainable Planning and Outreach to do some kind of preliminary planning work around that. And we anticipate that when we get the results of that, that will help us to kind of more identify what our vision and action plan is around resilience hubs and kind of how all these pieces fit together. So at that point, it could be this kind of getting ahead of myself in the agenda, but that could be potentially a working group or just kind of, items on the agenda at full commission meetings where you have opportunity to talk about that. But if you have,
Well, I guess it's sort of a broader question, like do it in those areas where you're asking, where you say like, this is an area for commission to engage, like, is this the proper way to do that?
Mhm. Yeah, you're talking about the far right column. And I think it's,
Yeah.
we had identified that like if the working groups were working on specific programs or specific issues, that column was a way for the staff to communicate to the working groups or to the commission that this is an area that we're looking for input from commission members or from those working groups. So exactly. I mean, I think if there's a working group that's set up to focus on that, particular project or issue, then, or even just in these meetings, that's a great time to get involved or provide the feedback, or even just to send it if you already have it, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
But on that particular issue, and I think this is an item that I think broadly, I mean, it kind of goes to process. In my mind, it seems like it'd be great to get the feedback and the input in the process rather than feedback on the result. And so I think this is one of those key items that's right for doing that process of that integrated approach. And so it'd be good to understand a little bit more about kind of what is the grant awardee, what their kind of the breadth of their scope of what they're doing, so that we can kind of see, does it make sense to plug in now when they're still working on their aspect of the study, or does it make sense to plug in after, once they've done sort of their preliminary work?
Sure.
Good point. Thanks for raising that.
Okay, good feedback. That's helpful. Moving along then, just a couple other items to hit on related to the natural areas management plan. So over 100 acres of prairie have been planted over the past couple of years. So really now they're kind of in that maintenance stage and kind of the mow stage and helping those prairies thrive. And recently, the Parks Commission also approved an additional 50 acres to be established in 2022, which will occur at Kicker Soccer Park, kind of in that area that's used for the like cross-country meets, at Terry Trueblood, along that south edge where it was burned down last year, and then Willow Creek Park. There's also an update in here on the extreme weather preparedness event that was held by the Multicultural Development Center, which was a climate action grant. We did receive the mid-year reports of everyone who has received a climate action grant for 2022, and we can certainly prepare that kind of as an update of where people are at for a future agenda packet. And then finally, the last item I just wanted to provide an update on is that Jane Welch, the recycling coordinator, and Sarah Gardner have been holding the Speaking of Education Engagement series on various topics and sustainability and resource management. And they've just been going really well. They've gotten some really positive feedback, great questions, great engagement. I mean, after nearly 2 years of Zooms and Zoom fatigue, they had 44 participants in their last meeting. So it's just really great news.
One question I have, it's a little bit along the lines of what Matt was raising, but, and I know there's often the upcoming events are listed in the sustainability newsletter. Would it be possible at all to kind of copy and paste it into here, events that if commissioners wanted to show up either for themselves or their family, and maybe just informally, a way we can introduce ourselves as a commissioner, not that it's a job for us or anything at that moment necessarily, but then we're kind of keeping them in mind, where as a citizen we can show up, but maybe it is also a chance if we can mingle a little bit when the time is right, we might be able to identify ourselves then as a commissioner and just get to know people, right? We've kind of been inside this room so much, right? Or on Zoom. Would that be okay? Is that not overstepping any bounds or anything?
No, I have no
So,
objections to
Is
that.
that good? So, and then just with the list is in front of us, then it's a little bit easier to, if that's okay, if it's easy for you guys to kind of cut and paste that, and then we have a central location. But
Out of curiosity, is everybody subscribed to the sustainability newsletter? Yeah, okay. So you're at least getting it that way as well. Good.
sometimes that seeing it 2 or 3 times really helps you remember, well, I wanted to do that.
And
So-
Becky, I think that's a good idea to, opportunities for us to think of ourselves as an ambassador from the commission, like if part of the role of the commission is to engage the community, being clear about our role and our ability to represent the commission is, I think is a good idea.
And a small, and one item, so it's really wonderful, the Parks and Rec got this certificate. Is it appropriate or a way that we could sort of collectively vote that we would like to, we applaud them for that, or to get a message to them that we think that's great, basically? Is that, do we need to have like a motion that we formally want to state that we applaud what they did and appreciate their efforts? Is that? Okay, I just want to make sure everyone agrees. I don't want to speak for everyone. I just think when, that we just all know, I mean, I think Ben, you especially know how much work must have gone in to achieve that kind of recognition. So,
Yeah, what most people won't be able to completely appreciate is it's not like there's a complete roadmap of how you get to these kind of objectives or goals that they got to. And so it's actually a very big accomplishment for them to get there. So pretty neat. So
could you use Ben's words and like as a commission, if everyone's in agreement, that we just make sure that they all know how much we appreciate their work. So that's all the action plan updates. We're good. And
I just had a quick question about one of the ones that was listed. You didn't talk about that one in particular, but the construction waste management program that you're just sort of looking into. I'm guessing that's just getting started and some initial discussions, doing research on other communities. Okay.
I don't have too much to share on that. Hopefully next month when we do our update again, we can. Just know that our resource management staff was approached by another agency about the possibility of kind of collaborating on a construction waste diversion program.
Okay. Yeah, that I would just like to voice that would be a wonderful resource to have, that as an architect, that we always get questions from contractors about what options are available to them. So it'd be great to be able to share that once it's fully developed.
Yeah, we'll pass it along. I believe the conversation is scheduled to be held later this month. So
Okay.
I'd like to
Thank you.
put in for like residents doing like their own home construction too. Like recently had to reside my house and it was like, can we even recycle any of this stuff? And so we had to like go and look. So, personally, I know it's more for like construction, but having like citizens saying, hey, I'm retiling my bathroom or something. Can I do anything with any of this stuff? Might be good to reach out to private citizens too and saying, hey, here's what you can do with your stuff. Just as a idea to engage the community.
I mean, it just seems like, yeah, when you're messaging about the kind of broader program, what are the ways that, like how do homeowners at their scale reach out to the coordinator or recycling coordinator or whomever it is that they need to in order to make contact and understand what is available to them.
Yeah. For mine, I had to like call 2 different people to say, hey, like where can I go with this stuff? And they're like, okay, we'll call you back. So it could be good too to have like a list of, once that this is, formed out a little bit more, to say, hey, put it on the city recycling or waste management website.
Any other questions on the action items? We'll move on to item 6, which is our unfinished business. Iowa City Climate Action Mascot Discussion. And we have an informational presentation from staff.
I was joking the other day that after 2 years on Zoom, I feel like every conversation is going to begin with either, can you hear me or can you see my screen? So let me make sure we share the screen for our Zoom folks, which for some reason doesn't want to come up for me. There we go. Oh, heavens.
Can we slightly, I always forget where the lights are in here. to dim.
All right, we're good to go. So thank you so much. First off, for your patience with this discussion. Of course, in an ideal world, we would have loved to have had this discussion as the consultants were presenting to you last month, and just by a confluence of events, we weren't able to provide the full context that we would have liked to. Some of you, we've been able to discuss this with a little in working groups, and I just wanted the opportunity to bring everybody up to speed. So to start with, the climate mascot was something we knew we wanted going into the process of hiring Cause Impact or whichever consultant ended up with the contract as part of our marketing plan. And part of that had come out of preliminary work we had done looking at guidance through the Urban Sustainability Directors Network on effective climate communications and sustainability communications, in which they identified mascots as a way to have an easily identifiable visual for your marketing campaign. And in fact, when we started talking with Cause Impacts, even before they were officially awarded the contract for this project, one of the things that we appreciated in their presentation was that they highlighted this as a way to address the lack of unification in climate messaging. As we know, climate change is driven by human activity. Human activity takes lots of different forms. That means you have to message on lots of different issues. And one way to try to unify them is to have a mascot to do so. The next slide, I think of to myself as the hard truth slide for myself professionally, which is to say, one of the key values in having a mascot is that for whatever reason, we tend to like messages coming from cartoon animals more than we do from public servants, right? And so instead of having a park ranger come and tell you, hey, make sure you put out that campfire, we have a cartoon bear that does it. Instead of having a city staff member say, hey, it'd be really great if you stopped throwing litter out your car window, we have an owl that does it. Louis the lightning bug doesn't actually have anything to do with climate action, but I just wanted to point out that as we were researching mascots, we noticed that Louis recently got an update and now has an LED bulb for his body instead of an incandescent bulb. We thought that was pretty cool. So the other thing we did as we were preparing for this was we looked at how mascots were used in other cities, and this led us specifically to Albert the squirrel, which is a sustainability mascot that's been used quite effectively in Flagstaff, Arizona. And as you can see, Albert the squirrel just gets put in different positions doing different activities that get added on to flyers and brochures and social media posts talking about taking a shorter shower, benefits the climate. And there too, you can easily imagine how someone might be more comfortable for entirely reasonable reasons to hear it from a small cartoon rather than a member of city government saying, shorten up that shower. So this was the information that we provided to Cause Impact as our baseline, what we were looking at and thinking we would do. One thing that we anticipated was that we would be doing the development of the mascot in-house ourselves. And we would be working with Cause Impacts throughout the process to figure out how best to use it. So they would make recommendations about this would be an instance where you would use the mascot. This is one where you might not. And one of the things that they said to us when we were going through that process was this is so central to the brand identity we're trying to help you develop and to all our recommendations that we would really like to take on the task of developing that mascot ourselves. So we entered into some conversations with them, and we outlined both what we knew from the USDN research as to why it matters to have a mascot or why it might be very beneficial for Iowa City to have it. And we also added in some best practices that we had identified through that process of looking at what other cities were doing with their mascots. And also, it's just a funny thing. This is actually the second time in my life I've gone through a mascot development process, which is not something I ever imagined I would say in one lifetime. But when I was with the University of Houston system, we went through a mascot development process, and that was very helpful in these conversations to be able to draw on that experience in the past. So we said to Cause Impacts, we wanted something locally relevant. That turns out to be pretty key because preferably you want something that people already have an emotional connection to. We wanted something that's non-threatening and also something that's non-threatened. And this goes to the point, John, that you raised in the last meeting. Something else we talked about quite a lot with Cause Impacts and have talked about extensively within the office itself is the need to humanize our climate messaging, right? To not make it about polar bears, which can seem abstract and far away to people living in Iowa City, but to make it something that is people can encounter every day here around Iowa City, and also something that is not itself immediately threatened by climate change. Because as though we love polar bears quite a bit, I don't know that we necessarily are looking to polar bears for survival techniques in the face of climate change, which is harsh but true. So we want something that feels like positive and uplifting, and that we can do this. You want that positive voice, tone, look, and feel, just to carry that sense of hopefulness. Cause impacts, I will say, initially came to us with the idea of using a bee. And John, you can probably remember this as well from the original presentation when we were going through for the bidding process. And they had identified it for actually some reasons that were similar to things we had already identified in-house. They talked about capitalizing on the presence of gold and black messaging here in the city. We had been talking a lot about trying to have something that shows that we work in partnership in some ways with the university, but are still distinctive from them. Because we do get questions all the time in the office about town and gown initiatives. And so the idea of having another black and gold mascot that could show parallel efforts, but still be distinctive, that was important to us. When they mentioned the bee, we thought, great, we had been having very similar thoughts, except we ended up having a lot of discussion about the fact that bees, one, do seem to be threatened by some unsustainable practices in the area. And for lack of a better way of saying this, no one's ever been stung by a goldfinch. So we asked them to take a look at a goldfinch as a potential alternative. That is what we had been looking at internally in-house. The goldfinch, we felt, had another advantage, being that it's the state bird, which, as you may recall from the Climate Action Plan, one of the things it calls for us is to be a state leader in climate action. And we thought by adopting the state bird, we could be sending a message at the same time that climate actions that work in Iowa City work for the entire state. So that was some of the thinking. I'll also add that if we learned nothing else from the solar field debacle at the Waterworks Park, it was that the birding population here in Iowa City are loud and enthusiastic and represent a broad swath of our environmentally engaged residents. And so we thought there were some advantages to taking a bird for that reason too. So you can see on this slide, this is where we were at by the time cause impacts came in. We had been doing a image review ourselves of goldfinches, trying to figure out what our image was going to look like, how we might draw it in-house. And you can see that it's pretty two-dimensional. What Cause Impacts was able to do when they took on this project for us, and one of the strong arguments they made is, you keep talking about humanizing your messaging. You really want to have a goldfinch mascot that actually feels a little more human. That way you can bridge the gap to people. And so they offered to take the research we had done and generate what ended up being Goldie, which you can see is more three-dimensional, has more human-like features, and does that bridge work that they were talking about. The other thing we asked them to do quite explicitly was an image audit of Herky, because we were very cognizant of the fact that Iowa City does already have one bird mascot. And so they went through and got all the images they could of Herky and brought them together, and then very carefully delineated how our mascot was going to be different, not just in appearance, so that somebody glancing at Goldie wouldn't necessarily mistake it for Herky, but also how Goldie would be used differently, the kind of guardrails that would be on place. So Goldie's not going to appear as a costume mascot anytime in the near future. Turns out that's quite expensive. But also Goldie's going to appear primarily in print material. It's not going to appear at athletic events, things like that. So it's going to be very clearly connected with climate communications and not with university athletic events. Based on some feedback we got from Stratus, we did reach out to the university athletic department to make sure that they had a chance to review the image as well and to offer any guardrails. We did send off the image for them to look at, and we haven't gotten a formal response on it, but informally we've been told by the athletic department that they don't see any cause for alarm in the use of this, and we encourage them to offer any guardrails they would like to see in place as well. So maybe there are poses, for example, they might steer us away from. We want to be aware of that. But so far, the conversations have been very positive. In fact, they're the ones who gave us the price tag on the costume mascot, so that was good to know. So in closing, I will just offer this up. If you really want a sustainability mascot to hate, let me offer Birdie from New York City. which is a mascot that I think actually does a lot of things wrong based on the best practices we reviewed from USDN. Birdie is supposed to be a monk parakeet, which is not local. I don't know how to say this. I'm going to say I find Birdie to be kind of ugly. And Birdie has been used intermittently by the Office of Sustainability in Iowa or in New York City. Nonetheless, when Birdie was recently retired by the city of New York City as a result of an administrative change, the city got an outpouring of letters from folks saying, bring back Birdie. So it had clearly resonated with residents. And Birdie had a 45% recognition rate among residents in New York City who said when they saw Birdie, they knew that it was messaging about climate. I will say, if we could get 45% recognition based on our use of Goldie so that people know when they see that they are getting a climate action tip, that would be such a clear win for our outreach and engagement efforts that I'm excited to see, I guess, how much further Goldie can fly than Birdie. So that's the big overview on that process, but we are certainly happy to answer any other questions you may have about this mascot. And I just want to say we appreciate all the thought that you all have put into the discussion that we had last month and through the working groups, because of course this is an important part of the outcomes of that marketing study we did, or market plan efforts that we've made. And so we want to make sure we're getting it right. Did I overwhelm you with cartoons?
I think as long as that was my big issue, is if the university is going to come back and say like, hey, we're, suing you for whatever without, that was my big issue with it. Just as long as the university doesn't have any issues and we have to revisit it or kind of do it over again, I didn't have a problem with it. It was just, hey, is the university going to have an issue with a black and gold bird that comes along? The other thing I did notice, like looking at it, the coloring on some of the things that they had proposed, the lettering kind of seemed a little, I know this is off mascot, but the green on the blue that they had recommended, it was hard to read. So just kind of, those are the things I had issue with. Just wanted to make sure that those were not going to be issues.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just want to second that. If any color schemes could be run through, there's that online visual, kind of an ADA level sort of thing. I know for some things it wouldn't be an issue because the format's so large, but just to be considerate since a good part of the population is colorblind.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually is a great moment to talk about what comes next now that Cause Impacts has finished their study. I'll say that the color scheme they presented is actually the second iteration that they gave us. The first one, we raised ADA concerns as well on it, which is why they ended up revising it. Just to provide just a little more context on this, what we've gotten from Cause Impacts are basically pieces of the puzzle to put together for a marketing plan, and it falls to us to construct that plan now. And that was sort of always the way it was going to be, in part because when we sent this contract out to bid, when we put out the RFP, the median price of a contract we got back was $350,000, which was well outside of our budget. What we opted for was a more affordable process that came in a little over $85,000 for the work that they did. And most of that work was more focused on the community engagement that you may recall they presented to us in their first presentation, reaching out to community groups and talking to different segments. And we asked them to look very specifically at 3 upcoming actions that we know are going to be a more difficult lift than some of the work that we've done before, just to get some extra eyes and ears, looking at it and hearing what the community has to say and thinking about how we might tackle some of those tougher nuts. What happens next is we are going to take their recommendations. We actually have an internal meeting with our communications staff here at the city to sit down and go through those recommendations and figure out which ones we think will work well for the city, which ones we think may not be such a great fit. One of the things that was completely absent from the recommendations was any discussion of how to use video, for example. So we want to loop in our video staff to figure out how we can integrate that into the plan. And then we will come up with a formalized plan that will guide our efforts going forward. Our goal, my goal at least, is I would really like to see a soft launch with the April newsletter. It makes sense with Earth Month to have something there, and we could begin with the newsletter update, assuming we resolve things like the question about the color scheme, which is an ongoing discussion here internally. And then from there, we can build out the different pieces that they've given us as attached to different initiatives, if that makes sense. I'll also say, not to talk too much about it, but one of the things that has been striking to me in listening in on discussions in the working group and discussions we've had with you all and internally with staff members in different departments and divisions, that the things people tend to really love about their recommendations are things that were cooked up by our communications staff here at the city. And the things that people have felt a little about are things that tended to come more from cause impacts corner, which tells me that we have really talented and great staff here working on communications in the city. And I'm really excited to see where they pick up these recommendations and run with them. I think it's really, if nothing else, emphasize just the great pool of talent and ability we have in understanding of the city among our communications professionals here, which is great.
Any other questions for staff about that? Well, thanks. I think we all got a great primer on what makes for a mascot and why. Thank you. So item 7 now is new business. And the first item, I think this is information about how the working groups function versus actual updates from the working group, right?
Yeah. Whew. One of the tyrannies of the pandemic is you never get a drink of water when you're
Oh,
wearing a
well.
mask the whole time. So forgive me if I get a little
We
froggy.
can take a 3-minute break if that's
Oh, no, it's
Sure.
good. You just,
okay.
John, yes.
One comment. I really like the thought process that you just communicated to us. It strikes me, blame the educational system, blame whatever you want to blame. There are a lot of people in school that don't even know who the governor is and don't know who the vice president of the United States is. And so I would suggest that as part of the kickoff, maybe we give a little more history on the goldfinch being the state bird of Iowa and why that was chosen, and a little background on it to introduce Goldie, not just, hey, you all know that this is our state bird. I would suggest that if you gave a test to a large percentage of the Iowa population and asked them what the state bird of Iowa is, they wouldn't even know that it's the goldfinch. So I think it gives us an opportunity to rehash some really fun history and tie it to what the goals of the Iowa City Climate Action Plan is all about. I'm ashamed to say that on behalf of our citizenry, that a lot of people don't know the goldfinch is our bird, and they haven't seen one maybe in ages. I just think it'd be a fun way to tie it all together.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thanks. You know, the other advantage of it being the state bird is, of course, goldfinches pop up all over the city all the time for a variety of reasons. And if we can create a connection between every time someone sees a goldfinch, they think about climate, then like every can of hard cider coming out of Wilson's Orchard is going to be doing a little work for us as well, which is really nice. Among other examples, I'm sure that I can think of in any minute.
And some people may see a goldfinch pop up in the future, and because of our effort to communicate the background of the state bird, they'll recognize it as the state bird, where right now they don't.
True.
Sarah, before you begin the next item, can we possibly darken the room a little? Because I think most of us don't have packets printed out, and if we can see the
Absolutely.
slide a little better, that would help.
Oh. Is that better?
You'll still have to read it to some of us.
Well, the big thing, the big takeaway in this next discussion is not necessarily this workflow chart, but just a discussion that we've been having for several months now, actually, I think more than a year, about how to make best use of your time and your talents, particularly as it regards to working groups. And one of the things that the staff has come to revisit is the idea of, rather than having standing working groups the way we do now, standing those down and making them more project focused, which is how many other boards and commissions at the city work. So instead of having an ongoing, let's say, equity working group, that group would stand down. And then if we had a specific project, let's say like the resilience hubs, which actually is a great example, I think it is one that we would want to be forming a working group about sometime this year. We would, in a commission meeting, ask to form a working group focused on that particular target. It would have very clear objectives to say, and a timeline saying over the next 3 months, we want to have some discussions in a working group format about the resilience hubs to answer these three specific questions. When those questions are answered, then the working group would stand down, right? And we would move on to other projects. And as part of that, the staff may come and make a request saying, you know, as we're forming this working group, we'd also like to pull in some members of the public who have some related skills so that we could have their added expertise to the discussion. And then we would ask you all as members of the working group or members of the commission to help us identify the folks that we would want to be incorporating into that discussion as well. And basically, this whole slide just says exactly that. We think this may actually make a better use of your time so that you're not being asked to meet twice a month, every single month. We think it also is a way to better tap into the expertise that you all bring by allowing you to identify on a project by project basis where your interests and knowledge may best align. And if for those of you who feel that maybe being in a working group setting is not the best use of your talents, we would, as parallel to this, suggest actually a recommendation that came up in the marketing study as well, that we would be identifying groups, community-based organizations that rather than sitting in on a working group meeting, we might say, hey, we would really like it if someone could sit in on the next Affordable Housing Coalition meeting to just talk a little about your work with the commission and to make sure that they understand that they have a channel of communication to reach us so that they can better speak to us about their needs and we can speak to them about their resources. And I think this very much goes back to what you were saying earlier, Michael, about how are you meant to be ambassadors to the community to help get the word out about what we're doing and ways that the community can tap into these initiatives and resources as well. So I know that we had discussed this a little in the adaptation and equity working group. I believe it was discussed a little in the building working group as well, which just leaves outreach to talk about the potential of standing down. But we wanted to bring this forward as an idea for a different way to do things this year. And I'd like to open the floor just to answer any questions you might have about this approach.
And if I could note, it actually has come before the entire commission, right, as a
Mhm.
discussion point. So.
Yeah.
And I guess I can, well, you know, as one of the people who initially wanted to form the working groups, one of the I think a couple of goals that I would hope that we don't lose if we stand them down as standing working groups. One is that, you know, as a commission, we're just 11 people. and we're supposed to represent the public, but I don't think we want to lose the opportunity for the public to be engaged and involved. And so, like you're saying, I think if it's a project-based approach, then we need to be actively working to engage others in that process. So it takes a bit more, due diligence to make that happen, I guess, more effort, maybe. So I guess that's one goal. The other is that it was also a framework that allowed for ongoing, like, ad hoc things to come up that may not otherwise, like, it's a venue for that thing, for that type of discussion to happen. And that's outside of the formality of the Climate Action Commission. For instance, if a member of the public brings up a topic, we can't talk about it. We can't discuss it at that same meeting. We have to kind of put it on the agenda for a future meeting, or, have them show up to a working group meeting, right? Was the way that you could do that. And I think there are issues out there, broad-based issues that should be discussed on an ongoing basis. And so I don't want to lose that opportunity or that ability to talk about those issues. Equity, outreach, those are working groups where we can talk about those topics on a regular basis. If they're gone and we're only talking about them on a topic-based or a project-based issue, then when do we talk about them? I think it can't just be the city staff. And that goes back to my earlier comment about process, is that I think, and I've seen this on multiple different issues, not just on climate action-based issues, but it's that, there's all this work that goes into something, and we don't know what our blind spots are. And then we present it to council, we present it to the commission, and it gets rejected. It gets a lot of pushback. And I think it's because there's just not an open process. If multiple voices are involved in the process of development, that there's collaboration, then you can help avoid the conflict that happens later. And so I think it's the same, is that if you lose the framework to have that open process, that open collaboration and communication, then I think we bind ourselves a little bit, and we can run into those issues and not see our blind spots. So those are just some goals that I think we shouldn't lose if we change our process. And we need to think about how we can keep that, to still meet those goals.
I think those are all excellent thoughts. Thank you so much for bringing them up, Matt. I can speak to one of the points in saying that part of our thinking behind this is with equity and outreach specifically, that these are such important topics for the work that we're doing. The thought is, by bringing them out of working groups, they become part of the more regular ongoing discussion of the commission itself. So instead of having a small subset discussing it, it's actually a gesture of saying we all want to be having this conversation regularly in meetings. And I would suggest even that if we have a member of the public who comes and raises a question that wants to be discussed, I don't think it's inappropriate in the course of that meeting to say, that's a really great point, we would like to discuss it more. Could we be forming a working group to address it, right? And we could address it more nimbly that way, I think. So, but yes, excellent points to consider. Thank you.
Kind of to go along with what you said, I don't want to lose the equity focus in any discussion with any number of people on any topic. And the same goes with outreach. But as I was thinking about that, I'm struck by the fact, I think there are only 3 of us in the room that were on the original board before we became a commission. And for those of you that weren't on the original board and are on the commission, there were some pretty solid reasons that we wanted to become a commission rather than be a board. And I don't know if those goals of like having credibility and being able to hold others accountable, I don't know if we lose or gain any of that as we transition from having formal working groups to having ad hoc working groups. And can you think of anything rationale wise about why we thought it was so important to become a commission rather than remain a board that might relate to this discussion, Matt?
Not necessarily as a commission. I mean, I think, you know, a working group, we only have 90 minutes, right? Every month to talk about issues as a group. And so the working groups just provide another opportunity to expand and go into detail on topics, which again, that could be project-based. I'm not saying that it couldn't.
And gain more talent too.
Yeah.
Along the way. That was another issue with working groups.
I think that's one thing I appreciated about the approach that you guys have suggested or proposing at this point in time is the ability to get involved in an action item that maybe your background or expertise is more relevant to, whereas you can't do that if you're assigned to a specific working group. I just think it's a good opportunity to get the most appropriate people actively working in working group format for a specific action item that's either currently taking place or on the horizon.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Michael.
I was gonna say, I like the idea of a project-based approach. I'm really interested in the concerns you brought up. And I think it's similarly a concern I would have is if, like, we talked about, well, there's no point in having these standing working group meetings if there isn't something for the groups to discuss and we could get people their time back. But I don't want that to be the goal in and of itself. And so if we make this change and then we just don't call ad hoc groups, I think that would be a loss. So I think, like, for me, it's not just getting my time back that's valuable. It's like having a valuable way to engage and contribute. And then I think to Matt's point, making sure then that we really get that chance to engage, equitably engage different members of the community.
And I do appreciate, Matt, what you're saying. I guess I admit I would argue a little against it, just in the sense that the working groups, as far as I see it, being on the building one, are not publicized in a way that most of the public even knows they exist or when to come. They're held when the members who are engaged at the moment, mostly as commissioners, in our case, we've had one member of the public who's been very regular. We decide when and where that can be. And realistically, I think it's very hard, because we are essentially, as volunteers, helping to be available to potentially other volunteers. It's hard to really make that be a forum to get widespread equitable input. So while I think it's important, and maybe there's a little bit of a hybrid approach here, where maybe the building group meets 4 times a year, because some of it is so kind of technical and there's things we wouldn't want to lose sight of. And so maybe that's a standing meeting for, there still is like a building working group. I feel like outreach and equity has really, is my understanding from how I wasn't on the board when the goal was to create the action plan and then the 100-day action items. But I feel like we really have come a long way with equity. We have equity tool. We have the tool that, like, Daniel used in his review that we hopefully have time to look at, so we have more tools in place. And I do think it's incumbent on every single one of us to be bringing that lens to everything we do, regardless of what our professional or other expertise has. And I think I feel like I've seen almost, everyone in this room make comments or bring that to the thinking. So I feel kind of confident that we would still have that opportunity, and maybe once a year, groups that don't have, say, 4 meetings, like maybe there's a little retreat for those who want to just take a pause and more generally look at things to make sure they aren't being missed. So I know those are kind of my thoughts. I kind of would like to see, and I feel like with the idea that if you're not going to be on a project base, and maybe I feel it's maybe a little unfair to call them quote ad hoc. They're project based. You're going from theme based, if you will, to project based. And I'm not just trying to spin something here, but maybe if we kind of use the word project based, it feels a little more substantial. Because when we were working on our building density memo, it was literally a whole year. I mean, it was a
Mhm.
very involved effort. And so those are, with the alternative that if you're not at a moment on a project group, you would be sort of offered or called upon to maybe be a liaison to something specific. To me, that really gets at some of the outreach and equity, because we would be, instead of 11 of us in the room, there'd be one of us in a room of 20 other people who know all about some important topic, and they are teaching us, we are imparting to them the fact that we exist, and it builds those relationships. So I do, though, really, because I worked with you so much in this, and
Mhm.
you've always been very mindful and thoughtful of, like, let's never lose sight of the whole, of the, both the particulars and the whole.
Yeah.
So
And I agree with you, Becky. I mean, I think,
that's-
having tried out the approach we're doing now for as long as we have, it may not be working the way that we initially intended either. And so why not try something else? So in that way, I think we have the ability to be flexible, and if things aren't going the way we want, we change again. So I'm open to, like I said, I'm open to all sorts of different ways of doing
we'll
this.
keep our meeting next week. We still have.
Oh, okay. Sounds
So-
good.
So one other thing that I wanted to comment on, Sarah, you provided us some much needed structured guidance with the adaptation and equity working group that has helped keep us in line and on track. That might be more broadly applicable to even the project-based approach, in that we clearly identified action items that the city is either currently working on or getting ready to work on. So it's not like we would, be behind the 8 ball. We would be aware of the projects that are near term that we need to start thinking about getting that appropriate working group together. So we're not dropping the ball on any of those action items.
I was just gonna kind of speak to my experience because I was on the building working group, which basically doesn't end. There's always something to kind of review and go over and whatever. And I was also on the transportation one where we really didn't do anything in the year that it was put together. Sat in on the waste one. I think that lasted one meeting. And so I think there's times where you need a project-based group, and there's times where you're going to need like a work group that's kind of a standing working group. And I wonder if there's some sort of blend or hybrid of both. But I do really like the idea of doing like the public outreach and going and meeting with these different groups. The city winning the award for the environmental thing, that's something where, as a commissioner, I'm interested in. I could go witness that, see what that's all about, bring that back, report it back to the entire commission. And maybe a way to ensure that we're, following through with that is to have within the agenda some sort of like outreach update where anybody who's gone and sat in on these different groups or listened to this webinar or whatever can bring information back to the larger group.
And maybe the approach is that at our commission meetings, we have as a line item just to identify if there are any, project-based working groups that we need to set up, or even a way to discuss, are there organizations, members of the public, other parties that we should make sure are engaged or part of that discussion, for that particular topic.
To be honest, what I'd really like to do is potentially in next month's meeting, bring forward the initiatives that we anticipate this year. We could use the help of a project-based working group on and go over it together as a commission to determine which ones you feel it makes sense to take on, so that we can map out the rest of the calendar year in terms of when are those working groups going to form? What are they going to address? Who do we need to be reaching out to be part of it? And we can stagger them a little so that, it makes the best use of everyone's time. Of course, Michael, that's not our one and only guiding principle, but I appreciate you saying that very much. Yeah, so it's a project we could be working on together to think of how we're going to divide up the year's work, essentially.
Anyone else have any other questions or thoughts? I think this is a great discussion. I really appreciate all the views.
I think going to a project-based thing would be more inclusive, not only of the group, but community too. And not like everybody else is saying, hybrid might be kind of the way to go. You got people in their specific niches that's what they're good at, but then open it up to more, community members, or, some projects somebody might not have any idea on. Others, might be like, hey, this is literally what I do. So I think it might be a little bit more inclusive of everybody in the community if you went to something more project-based, but still had something like a, not to make it clicky, to avoid that. So.
Well, Sarah, would you like to we'll put it, I want to make sure we have time for Daniel's
Mhm.
presentation and some discussion. So, and maybe it's good, this like kind of thing to let us all rest and then percolate with more ideas for next month. Is that all right?
Absolutely, that makes sense. And I'll say, we're not interested in forcing the buildings working group to stand down if it would rather continue meeting. We'll certainly leave that to you to discuss in your upcoming meeting and then report back at the next
Sounds
one.
good.
Thank you. So item 7B is, do I need to note if a commissioner needs to leave? But I don't know.
Got to go pick up my kids.
At this point, Ben is leaving to get his kids. Thank you, Ben. So next item under new business is the multifamily EVSE rebate program. So it's info update and some discussion, and Daniel Bissell will be leading this.
Daniel Bissell, Climate Action Analyst. So as you know, the Eastern Iowa EV Readiness Plan and the city's Accelerated Action Work Plan calls for expanding opportunities for EV charging and incentivizing electric vehicles and EV charging. Mid-American Energy does have a current rebate on the equipment. They offer $1,500 towards the purchase of a commercial entity to purchase the equipment. So the city of Iowa City is proposing to supplement that by offering a 50-50 match on the installation costs of such equipment. So we're proposing to offer up to $1,000 of installation costs if no electric service panel upgrade is required, or up to $2,500 if a service panel upgrade is required. Some of the requirements that we identified as the labor must be completed by a licensed electrician. We're going to request usage data for up to 2 years following the project completion. And we are offering educational materials, not only for the landlords, but tenants as well on the use of such equipment. We do have interest already from a couple landlords and a couple homeowners associations that govern a few condos in town. So we are excited that there is a buzz out there, and there is a desire to get something like this done from a few landlords and HOAs in town. So with that, I'd like to open it up to any discussion or questions you might have.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No,
Thought Matt
I'm
was
just
going.
letting anyone else go first. I do have some, but I'd like you all to go first.
Yeah, I have a few questions. It didn't look from the project plan that really any renters had been contacted yet, and I was wondering if we have any sense of what what renters need, or how many renters are looking for EV charging stations. If we have any idea of how many people it might impact.
We don't. No, we haven't heard from any renters, but with the landlords that have contacted us and are interested in such a program, we do plan on doing outreach with those tenants once an install is completed.
Does it make sense to do it before the install is completed? I can imagine a situation where we end up putting in a bunch of EV charging stations where there are no EV cars or where it's not actually serving the goal of, I know an explicit goal was to make electric car infrastructure available to people of color and low income
Right.
families. And so I'm just,
And with the electrification of transportation in general, it is sort of a chicken and the egg problem. A lot of people think, well, I'll get an EV once I see charging infrastructure in place. A lot of businesses and commercial entities are saying, well, I'll install EV charging when people have electric vehicles. So again, with the chicken and the egg program, someone's going to have to go first.
I guess my related question is the success metric for that is like it will be successful if several property managers install it. And I'm wondering if that means like if 2 property managers install it, or like, I guess, are we targeting like specific property? I guess like if 2 sort of high-end apartment buildings installed on this program, would we call it a success?
That would probably be more of an opportunity to market to more lower end properties. I think what you're getting at.
Yeah, well, actually, I guess more specific, I'm getting at like, I would love to see a more specific success metric, like either, and rather in terms of, instead of in terms of property owners, if the goal is the people that have access, if we can maybe set goals in terms of the number of people that we hope to impact.
All right.
Love to recommend that. Then I think that would also then give us something to discuss later if we aren't successful with this project, then, oh, well, you know, then we have something to talk about, like, oh, how come it didn't impact anybody? And we can make changes in the future.
Yeah,
Because
that certainly makes
your
sense.
metrics talking about utilization are based on a percentage of your population, right? Based on a population, not based on a percentage of your building owners necessarily. So if you align your metrics, like you're saying, then you understand, you can track it and measure it.
I was also wondering a little bit about the success metrics, and it related back to, and thanks for going through the equity sheet. That was very interesting to kind of think about and helpful. But I did wonder on, so under one of the steps, it's actually step 2, data point 2B, just so you know which one I'm talking about. It didn't mark off any impacts on specific neighborhoods, yet then there are certain populations that are identified. And I would think that in effect, probably some neighborhoods would potentially be more of a candidate or more impacted, because surely there's some neighborhoods where there's virtually no multifamily housing that's rental. And so maybe is there a way to go back and look at the neighborhoods and maybe do a little more identification of, I think that gets back to Michael's earlier point as well, of where might there be, if you can try to do a little more outreach, where might that be? And because also one of the groups that might be affected would be young people. That wasn't checked off, but I could see that might be an area or a group that could be affected. And yeah, I just kind of wonder if there's a way for the success for just a clear identification on what will be the goal and therefore the metric of success. And just from a practical point of view, and I know the total cost for these installs can vary kind of, greatly depending on what additional work needs to be done. I guess if in the fine print, you could just make sure there's some wording, there's the landlords are going to have a part that they kick in, right? And
Right.
There just needs to be some wording so that potentially if it's a lower cost install, that between the rebate and what Iowa City's, I guess you have an adjustment. I guess what I'm getting at is just to be sure that there's no way that the landlord pays nothing. Just to make sure the way you've defined things, that it's clear that if Iowa City is going to pay 50% of an install, that always subtracts out the assumption that they're going to get the Mid-American rebate. And I'm sorry, it's something we because the county has a program, and it's just, I know I'm kind of getting the weeds here, so I could talk to you about that offline, but it's just, it's like it's a way to make sure that you don't overpay someone.
Sure.
And I'm not explaining it very well, so, but.
I think I understand what you
Yeah.
are meaning, and we can dig into the Mid-American rebate. And I believe the way that functions is it's an up to $1,500. I don't think they're going to hand you a check for $1,500
Right.
if you only spend $700 on the equipment, but I can double check on that.
Yeah, and then what's in our program, what we did was like, folks would have to get their rebate, then come back to submit to us. So we saw the final program cost and we knew what half would be, so to speak. It was very similar, it's set up very similar. So
Sure.
you're not assuming, and it works out better for them sometimes, because sometimes they might not get as much, right? So, but.
I had a question about the kind of the extent of the program. So the incentive is for the charging equipment. Is it a per installation or is it a per project? I mean, for instance, if someone's putting in 10 of them, are they getting the same incentive as if someone's putting in one of them? That was a little unclear to me. So, because having worked on these types of projects in my, in my line of work, I know that, it's what you're doing as an incentive for one pays for quite a bit of it. If you're paying for, it's a small incentive if you're trying to install quite a few.
Right.
So that goes back to the goals, as far as, are we trying to get as many of these as possible, or just trying to get as many people as possible involved in getting this done?
Yeah.
And then the other, that goes back to my second question, which is the total amount budgeted to the project, because I think I saw 35,000 in there. If you take that for the number that you're putting on the incentive, it doesn't seem like you're gonna actually get that many, unless you're doing it on a per project basis rather than per item basis. So.
Thank you.
The last question I have is on signage. And Sarah, I know you know a lot about this and the issues of consistency of signage. Will there be a way to help folks with that piece of it so that maybe everybody's using the same sign rather than on their own ordering something? And
That's something that we intend on helping property
along.
owners with as
great,
part of the education and outreach piece.
okay, great, that's good to hear. So
Oh, sorry, I have one more question about the data tracking. So you had on there that it's the part of the program is that to ask for the people who are getting the incentive to provide data for a certain duration. I was just wondering how, is that like a voluntary sort of reporting, or is that something that you're asking them to provide access to the account information? I just wondered.
We were expecting them to report to us.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't expect like their login for their ChargePoint account or something like that.
Okay. And so it's probably a per month usage that you kilowatt usage or whatever.
Right, per
Yeah.
month, and probably reported annually.
Okay, annual. Okay.
So question, does a landlord do this? And I think the answer is yes. Does a landlord do this because they want to attract customers? I have a place for you to recharge your electric vehicle, therefore you will rent from me. Or do they do it because they're being asked by their existent clientele for charging stations? And one more thing on signage, I'd like to think Goldie would be standing there with a plug. Well, yeah, and a bag of money too, but might as well get Goldie involved in this at every opportunity. So Goldie should be on all the signs in Iowa City where you can recharge. I think.
So John's comment, it goes back to us what Michael was saying, like kind of knowing, are there buildings with renters who want this? So, because I guess one little unintended consequence I would worry about, a building where almost nobody has shown interest. The landlord puts these in, and then when he's renewing, or she, sorry, when the landlord is renewing leases, somehow gets when somebody, that in a sense, someone gets pushed out because there would be someone else who wants that EV charger, and rents go up a little bit, and somebody who could afford that place previously now isn't getting a renewed lease. and somebody else with the EV is moving in.
That was kind of my question too, is how are
Just,
we
you know, because-
going about it? Like, are there restrictions on where and who can put these in? Because if you have a rental building and it's only on-street parking, it opens it up to everybody. Or what restrictions do these, commercial renting places have in what they can and can't do with it? And as Becky was saying, are people going to be charged more because this is a new opportunity for them?
Well, that's one of the things that we have been talking about is, again, providing education to landlords and HOAs on cost sharing, how they can recover the cost of electricity from the residents who use it, or if it is lightly utilized, maybe eating it because eating the cost because it doesn't add that much to their electric bill overall.
I mean, maybe one question is, I assume there's an application process, right? And so maybe one of the questions on the application is what percentage of your tenants have an interest in, EV charging? I mean, and maybe that's a way for you to say, oh, all of a sudden I see a higher percentage here, or they need to ask their tenants, right? To respond to a quick survey or something. So, I mean, I think it may just be something simple to help you direct. Right now, you're probably, again, this is in the pilot stage, right? You're just getting out there with the people who show initial interest, but in an ongoing way, it might make sense to, and in a competitive way, it might make sense to help you prioritize where things go.
How does ChargePoint work? Do they? Like, do you have to pay to have a ChargePoint machine and like all that have this software, or like does ChargePoint pay rent for getting the spot there that they're getting money from? Like, don't ATMs
So
pay rent?
Typically, the station owner, in the case of ChargePoint, their model is the station owner would pay for ongoing maintenance fees and internet connectivity, all of that. And then the station owner can set a price or have it open for free, set a price per kilowatt hour or per hour for residents or people to use.
One other question I have is like damage, just like if a point gets damaged, are they going to be eligible to keep doing it, because other people in the parking garage keep backing into it or something? Just kind of, going along the lines of cost and how much we have allotted for this, is somebody going to be replacing it every month or something?
Yeah, I would imagine that the station owner, the landlord, would be responsible for any maintenance or damage.
Hopefully they'd have insurance. So just in the interest of time, we only have about 2.5 minutes left. Would it be okay? Is this something, Daniel, you'll be bringing back to us, kind of a revised version, or will we hear from you again on this? Or
If you would like.
What would the commission like to hear again? Given the questions we had, maybe hear again from Daniel on this?
Yeah, I would.
Yes?
Sure.
Yes. Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Thanks
Or-
for all your work on it.
Or at least an update. I mean,
Yeah, or at least it's some kind of update, just, we know it's a pilot program, so, the update.
Just really quickly, is this an opportunity for an ad hoc committee that's going to include outreach, include equity, include getting outside people that know more about this than we know, to put a group together to help with this? Just asking.
Maybe
Good.
you guys can think about that and bring that back as part of the update, whether that might be needed. Would that be a way to handle? We could discuss it next time, whether that seems needed.
Sure.
So the updates on the working groups, I think, again, and the reports are in there, and again, commissioners are expected to read those. And I think with the way our discussion went today, we were able to cover most of that. And so the recap of actionable items for the commission working groups and staff. You guys, I saw you furiously writing a lot, so I hope we didn't give you 100 things to do.
Well, we're going to provide you an update on the EV pilot program.
Okay.
The buildings working group is going to meet and discuss whether you'd like to start meeting quarterly or how you'd like to handle that transition. I will plan on meeting with the outreach working group since, well, actually, let me put that to the members here. Would this discussion like to be taken to the outreach working group, or it feels to me like it might be better for me just to reach out to the members of the public who've been participating in that, to give them an update as to the transition toward project-based, and ask if they'd be interested in participating in future working group meetings that way. All right, that's how we'll handle that. Great. And then in the next meeting, we will bring a list to you of potential working group projects for the year ahead so that we can map it out.
And I'm just going to give myself a task, which is, since we would like a message to go to the Parks and Recs folks, why don't I write that? And I will send it to you guys and you can forward it on. That way it sort of comes from the commission versus we heard. So thank you, everybody. And with that, we will adjourn and see you in March.